Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's Planning Applications Committee on the 4th of July 2023. Item 1 is the Chair's welcome and evacuation procedures. As we've got a lot of unfamiliar faces, I will go through that in full. I ask that you ensure that you are all signed in on the sign-in sheet provided. These will be used in case of an evacuation. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Lloyds Bank building on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits, which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the buildings, please make yourself known to a member of staff. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded for future publication on the Council's website. Please can I ask that you turn off your mobile phones or at least turn them to silent for the duration of the meeting. And finally, please can I ask everyone here, we had a very lively debate and discussion last week, which got very, very heated. So I would remind you, please, this is not a personal thing. And can I just remind us, let's all try and be kind, okay? Let's try and not make this a personal thing. We say it did get heated, and I think that doesn't add anything positive to the discussion. So I'd ask everybody here tonight that is speaking, just let's try and just keep our heads and let's work the system so that we get the sort of best outcomes that we can. Item 2, apologies. Do I have any apologies? No. Minutes. Okay, I've got 2 sets of minutes which hopefully you've seen for the 13th of June and then for the emergency meeting which was held on the 26th. Can I ask if members are happy that I sign both sets of minutes off? Can I just have a show of hands, please? Okay, that's carried unanimously. I'll sign those off as a true and accurate record. Okay, thank you. Item number 4, declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest that they need to declare other than those shown on the schedule? Councillor Smith.
Yes, we're on. Yeah, it's very public knowledge that as ward councillor for Bulkington, I've for many years objected to the overdevelopment in the village. That was brought about by the late inclusion in the current borough plan. My very public personal views against the principle of development are clearly at odds with this application. So on that basis, I'd like to withdraw from debate and any consideration on this item.
Okay, thank you. Any other members? Councillor Markham.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is actually about item 2. I recently become portfolio for the Children's Services at Warwickshire County Council, and that does actually fall under my portfolio. Having said that, I've had no involvement in this to get to this stage. I have asked for advice from legal, and they've said that it's okay for me to carry on sitting here.
Thank you, Councillor Markham. That is duly noted. I also have a declaration of interest. For many years, I've been involved in fighting the proposed development of HSG 7, HSG 8 in Bulkington. Therefore, I am not able to be impartial on this matter, and I will also be speaking in opposition tonight. So for that first item, I will vacate the chair, and I shall be handing over to Councillor Shepherd, sat on my right, who will be chairing that item. Okay, declarations of contact. Are there any declarations of contact? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I think in common with most other members, I have received some objections from residents about application number 2. I think it's councillors Rob and Mandy Tromans who have sent letters to everyone else. I'm not aware of any other ones that I can think of. Those are the main 2, Chair. I think that may apply to others.
Sorry, just a quick show of hands. All those that have also had the same, yeah. So I think we've all had that. So yes, there have been those declarations then of contact, but obviously I'm assuming, as no one else is raising it, that you know, you haven't sort of prejudged or shown which way you're going to vote. So that's fine. Okay, so in that case, then that moves us on to our first item. So I shall hand over now to Councillor Shepherd, who will be chairing the first item.
That's it. I obviously haven't got the magic touch. So I'll move over to Claire for item 1, the site 108C002, Leyland Road, Bolkington. Claire.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, this is an outline application for up to 95 dwellings, including access, with all other matters reserved. Access would be taken from Leyland Road to the north-east of the site. Objections have been received as detailed on the agenda and addendum. This isn't working either. Bear with me. Press about. Thanks, Chris. Apologies, everyone. Technical itch there. So move on to the next slide then. In terms of the principle of development, policy DS5 of the Borough Plan refers to a number of sites that will be allocated for residential development, and this site forms part of HSG8. The key development principles under policy HSG8 include the provision of at least 495 dwellings in a mix of dwelling types and sizes, provision of plain open space, financial contributions to education provision and towards highways improvements. A concept plan SPD has been produced for all these sites in the borough, including this allocation of HSG8. The concept plan, SPD, establishes a strategic context for planning applications and sets a baseline position in terms of assessing future schemes which will contain more detailed proposals. A key objective of the concept plan is to ensure that the allocation of land is brought forward in a strategic and comprehensive manner. It is intended to provide a visual representation of policy requirements as well as other key elements and is conceptual in nature. They are not intended to be exhaustive and show all the required elements, but they are a material consideration when deciding planning applications. Vehicular access is shown on the concept plan at 2 points to the southeast of the site from Coventry Road. In contrast, the illustrative layout as shown on the screen proposes its own access from Leyland Road. However, the level of conflict arising is not considered to be unacceptable, and it is recognised that concept plans are primarily used to provide a visual representation of policy requirements and are not intended to be exhaustive nor dictate how all elements of a site are to be developed. The development of this site would not prejudice the ability for all other parcels of the allocation to be delivered in accordance with the policy HSG8 in the Borough Plan. The development of the adjacent parcel to the southeast under planning application reference 38856 was approved subject to the completion of a legal agreement at committee on the 26th of June. That scheme relates to a full application, and the layout would dictate the internal access arrangements proposed at reserve matters stage for this application under consideration. The layout of the adjacent site shows 3 pedestrian access points through the boundary hedgerows and 1 vehicular access point. This application would be required to ensure that the connection access points proposed at the relevant reserve matters stages would align with those at the adjacent site. A Section 106 legal agreement would be utilised to ensure that unrestricted access between the 2 sites via the pedestrian and vehicular links is secured in perpetuity. The scheme proposes the demolition of number 7A Leyland Road to facilitate the access into the site. Number 7A is a single-storey detached bungalow located to the southwest of Leyland Road. The property is not considered to be of any historic or architectural interest which would warrant its retention, and the loss of this dwelling to facilitate the development of the wider site is considered to be acceptable in principle. The site is considered to be in a sustainable location and one which would be within walking distance of a range of services and facilities and would provide access to a range of sustainable transport options. In terms of affordable housing, Policy H2 of the Borough Plan requires 25% of all developments to be affordable on sites of 15 dwellings or more. The submitted planning statement sets out the scheme will provide this level of provision, which would be secured through a legal agreement. The precise tenure split would be confirmed at the reserve matters stage, where the precise number of proposed units is known. In terms of market housing, a detailed housing mix based on a detailed layout plan would form part of a subsequent reserve matters. In relation to visual amenity and landscape character, the proposal would have an impact on the landscape of the area. However, its impact is not considered to be significant to warrant a refusal of outline planning permission. It should be recognised that the site is part of an allocated site within the adopted borough plan, and while its future development in line with policy HSG8 would have some impact on landscape character, the benefits associated with the development must also be taken into consideration. Any future reserve matters application should demonstrate how they meet the form of development principles as set out in that policy. While the demolition of number 7A would have an impact on the pattern of development along Leyland Road, the impacts arising from the break in the street scene would not result in any adverse impacts upon the character and appearance of the area. In terms of residential amenity, a noise assessment has been submitted to support the application. The Environmental Health team have reviewed the findings which identify some elevated noise arising from the railway. Condition 16 has been recommended to secure a noise and vibration attenuation scheme which would include glazing and ventilation details. A 1.8 metre high acoustic fence is also requested to be erected to the side boundaries of the 2 existing houses on Leyland Road to mitigate any noise impacts of vehicles using the access. As this is an outline application, the layout is not being considered, and any future reserve matters application would need to ensure that distance standards are met in relation to existing properties and within the site. The house types will all need to comply with nationally described space standards, and all plots will need to have sufficient private amenity space, but these matters would be addressed at the relevant reserve matters stage. Turning to highway safety, access is proposed from Leyland Road between existing properties located to the southern west edge of Leyland Road. And as I've mentioned previously, the demolition of number 7A is required to achieve this. County highways have no objections, subject to conditions and a legal agreement to secure various financial contributions. The impact of the potential vehicle movements associated with the development on the highway network has been assessed, and traffic modelling has been carried out on various junctions. The proposed development would make a proportional contribution to junction improvements in the area. No concerns are raised by county highways in relation to vehicle turning and manoeuvring in and out of the proposed junction and visibility displays. The NPPF outlines the need for planning to promote walking, cycling and public transport and to make the fullest possible use of these. The nearest bus stops are situated on Ben Road, which are approximately 320 metres from the proposed site access. Policy TC3 of the Borough Plan states that any new development should be within 1.2 kilometres walking distance of a district or local centre. The furthest properties on site are likely to be located around a kilometre from Bulkington District Centre, which therefore meets this requirement. The layout of the site would retain the existing public right-of-way, which enters the site from Leyland Road to the north, runs along much of the south-east boundary before crossing the hedgerow into the adjacent parcel of land. In relation to flood risk and drainage, the site is within flood zone 1. Surface water generated by the proposed development is proposed to be disposed of via sustainable drainage to ensure there's no increase in runoff discharge off the site. The County Flood Risk Team have no objection subject to conditions. In terms of ecology, open space and biodiversity, an ecological appraisal has been submitted to support the application. This confirms that the majority of the site was of low wildlife interest. Trees and hedgerows to the boundaries of the site are considered to offer suitable habitat for bird nesting. The majority of the site was thought to be of low value to foraging and commuting bats. The Parks team have no objection subject to conditions, including the construction ecological management plan, lighting scheme and the provision of integral bat and bird bricks. A biodiversity net gain report has been submitted. However, only a screenshot of the metric Excel spreadsheet has been submitted, which is not in accordance with our SPD requirements. The report, however, does set out that the scheme would result in a net gain in linear and area habitat biodiversity. The metric calculations undertaken show a net gain of 0.57 units in area-based habitats and a net gain of 0.57 units for linear and 0.35 net gain for connectivity features. A revised biodiversity impact assessment has been requested, but this has not been submitted to date. Nevertheless, it is recognised that the indicative layouts submitted are not for approval at this stage, and it's not recommended to include any of these plans within any approved plans condition. Whilst biodiversity net gain is not a reserved matter, the baseline value of the site referred to within the submitted report is considered to be accurate. Officers consider that a biodiversity net gain could be achieved on the site. However, this may require amendments to the illustrative layout or reduction in numbers or increased densities. Condition 9 is therefore recommended to ensure that the submission of a revised BIA is submitted, which shall be submitted with the reserved matters. Biodiversity net gain would also form part of the Section 106 legal agreement. Open space on site is proposed to the south-west along the railway line, providing land for active recreation and general amenity land and younger children's play provision. Any further details of this would be secured and covered under the reserved matters. The scheme would result in the loss of a small section of hedgerow to the north, western and south-east boundaries, and the proposal would also require the removal of a Category C group of trees. The losses would appear to be minimal and required solely to achieve the pedestrian connectivity and the vehicle access connection. To mitigate the losses proposed, the Council's tree officer has advised that to ensure optimal tree cover, the establishment of new hedge trees, especially to the southern boundary, should be considered. In terms of archaeology, no designated or non-designated heritage assets lie within or close to the site. A heritage assessment has been submitted with the application, which advises there is a potential for some deposits to survive within the site. The County Archaeological team have been consulted and requested that fieldwork be undertaken prior to any decision on the application being made. This has been carried out in the form of trial trenching. This identified the remnants of ridge and furrow, a small quantity of most post-medieval pottery, and some linear features which were interpreted as ditches, which most likely represented former field boundaries. The archaeological team at the county has advised that the submitted evaluation report is satisfactory and that in light of those results, the proposed development is unlikely to have a significant archaeological impact. Therefore, no further work in the field is required. In terms of contamination, a land contamination assessment has been submitted. Environmental Health have confirmed they are satisfied with the findings and no contaminated land conditions will be necessary. In relation to air quality, an air quality impact assessment has been submitted. Environmental Health are satisfied with the findings of the assessment and have no objections subject to conditions, which cover a dust management plan, electric vehicle charging points and gas-fired boiler installations, which are covered in conditions 5, 24 and 27. In relation to planning obligations, a number of contributions have been requested for things such as education, play and open space, highways mitigation, sports provision, public transport and improvements to facilities at Bulkington Village Centre. The applicant has agreed to these contributions. The recommendation is therefore approval, subject to conditions and the completion of a legal agreement. Thank you, Chair.
There we go. Thank you, Claire. Before I move into the speakers, I've got Councillor Condacor. Have you got your camera on? I have. So can I make residents who are speaking aware that if you don't want to be filmed, if you can let me know, and I'll make sure that doesn't happen. Thank you for that. So I'll move on to the speakers. You've got 3 minutes to speak. I am going to have to be quite strict on that. So we'll move on to the first speaker, which is Mr. Paul Glynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and your planning officers for giving us the time to speak tonight. Sorry if I don't look at you, it's just that I'm reading off my script. Thank you. I am speaking this evening on behalf of the residents of Ben Road, Dingley Road, Campling Close and Leyland Road. The estate consisting of 104 properties and is accessed in and out via Ben Road. Please note that 117 residents signed a petition against this development. We, the residents, would like to bring to the Planning Committee's attention the following points. The concerns relating to the adequacy of the Highway Information Survey submitted to support the application. The survey was conducted in Leyland Road within a small cul-de-sac where we only have 4 houses and 4 bungalows are situated residents' cars. From their properties would have been the only ones measured on this road in this survey. A more accurate measurement of vehicle volumes would have been at the top of Ben Road at the junction, where the volume of traffic, the whole estate, would have been measured in and out. The estate of, as I say, 104 properties equates to 1.5 cars per residency. Item 2, the dangerous T-junction at the top of Ben Road. At the top of Ben Road, a T-junction that leads to Bedworth and into the village centre. Left is a blind spot which goes into Western Lane, which also people come across from Nuneaton Road, which is a very busy road. Into Bedworth Road. And we have, obviously, turning left into Ben Road, directly opposite the T-junction, we have a bus stop, which incorporates not only local buses, but also to 3 schools in and around the area. So we have at various times children being dropped off at that thing. At to the right of Ben Road, there's Croft Road, and opposite Croft Road is another bus stop that goes into Bedworth and follows on to Coventry. Evidence has been submitted to demonstrate the collisions and near misses that have accuracy occurred in Ben Road T-junction. they have been reported to police. For example, reference 146 on the 30th of the 5th, 2017 at 11:25, where a vehicle was written off trying to come out of Ben Road. The size of the vehicles that will potentially come into Ben Road are what we call 8-wheelers, Class 2 vehicles. They consist of, they take away the excess muck and things like that. And they start off at 32 tonnes, and then with the muck on it, it goes up to 52 tonnes. So you are going to have 52 tonne vehicles trying to get in and out of Ben Road, either turning left or turning right. If they're turning left, they will have to take up a portion of the road on the opposite side, which then will cause, it could cause a safety issue. Oh, right, okay.
Thank you, Chair. Without additional infrastructure, this is a totally unsuitable and unsustainable location for this housing. We have an infrastructure development plan. We have all sorts of things that tell you all the things you need to build in order to develop, and we just don't have them on the ground. I initially objected to this planning application on cycling grounds. There is no safe cycling way out from this site, and particularly going to Bedworth, it's an absolutely lethal road between Bedworth and Bulkington to cycle on. So it's not a sustainable and safe location until you spend a packet load of money and put decent infrastructure in. But then I found out about the sewage network, and the sewage treatment pumping station on the opposite side of the railway line is one of the worst in Warwickshire. It has 222 hours of discharges, 30 times last year. It cannot cope. And the borough plan has a big set of documents. There's the North Warwickshire Water Cycle report, there's the infrastructure development plan, and there's the concept plan for this site, all of which highlight this side of Bulkington needs extra sewage treatment capacity or pumping capacity. On the other side of Bulkington, things aren't too bad. But on the west side, if it goes into the pumping station, and 200 hours a year already, it is going into Wenbrook, which then comes down through Nuneaton, past Bedworth. You clearly have a problem with planning rules in terms of turning this down, but you can clearly say houses on this site shouldn't be occupied until they sort out the sewage treatment mess. That could involve having a connection to the Bedworth pumping station, which does have spare capacity, or upgrading the Bulkington one. But we cannot have excess sewage going into our already overloaded network. And to demonstrate what happened when we had a flood in Weddington 3 weeks ago by the church, normal flooding, the water comes up the manhole covers and the drains. When the sewage system overloads, it then adds sewage into that mix. So the flood water then carries the sewage to a greater extent. And I say we've already got an issue in Wenbrook from Bulkington, and this development is just far too far. We've approved far too much 2 weeks ago, and there is no capacity for these houses to discharge into that pumping station at the moment. So I ask you to reject, defer, put extra conditions on or something so that we do not dump more sewage into our environment, because it goes into Bulkington, it goes past Bedworth on Wenbrook, through Riversey Park, through Nuneaton and out all the way. We have to make Severn Trent do something. Severn Trent does respond to the infrastructure development plan and concept plans. What they haven't done is respond to the planning application. And that is a massive problem, but we know the sewers don't cope. This is not a sustainable location. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Chair, members of the Planning Application Committee, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak on this item. This is one of a number of sites that forms HSG8 and is being built in what is already a heavily developed area of Bulkington, where approximately 800 dwellings will be built in total. Two residents in the space of less than a day raised a petition of 117 signatures, which demonstrates a strong sense of feeling regarding the issues of building and developing on this site. As such, it's important that these developments are done in a sensitive manner that will not impact upon the residents who already live in the area. I would therefore raise a number of issues which I share with the residents who will be impacted by the development. Firstly, the traffic count, which was done, and I think Mr. Glynn already sort of mentioned that in his own talk, was sort of done on the close part of Leyland Road, where there's only several houses actually built. So I don't think the modelling has been done to a sufficiently high standard at the moment and won't show the full impacts on the highways, particularly Ben Road, which comes off Leyland Road. They will in turn expect a much higher than predicted volume of traffic. Ben Road was never designed to be an arterial route in this section of Bulkington, and residents are rightly concerned about the traffic volume and safety issues that will be had by the additional properties that access the route. It's already a road which struggles to accommodate HGVs, and although I know you can get things like a dust cart down there, I think anything bigger than that and you are going to start to struggle. And if that is the only way in and out of the development, then there are going to be issues once we start building out this area. There is also a blind spot in the junction at Western Lane, Ben Road and Bedworth Road. What mitigation has been put into place to cope with this? Further to this, I'm concerned about the report states on page 29, paragraph 3, shown in your booklets, that these are issues in terms of access with the adjacent site, which you've already kind of mentioned. And I think it would be remiss of us to pass this tonight without there being further conversations with the developers linking up. We've already seen what happens when developers don't link up these areas. It goes awry, and then we get one developer trying to pull out of an agreement. So to avoid that, I think there needs to be a proper consultation on that between the developers, perhaps even conditioned. I would urge that before any further developments are made, that the developers Roscon speak with local residents and look at how the issues I've raised can be mitigated, or if the highways part of the plan can be altered. Otherwise, the dream homes that you will create will also create a nightmare for existing residents. Surely, this is not something you would wish to have your brand associated with. I would therefore urge for more consultation with local residents, as at the moment, a lot of the outline plan is found wanting. And I would ask you to think about Coventry Road. It was on your initial plan that you said Coventry Road could be an entrance and an exit point. And I know it's not directly on your land, but I would like to see sort of talks going on between developers to get the best results for our residents. And none of these sites should be taken individually. They should be taken collectively and looked at as such. So it's a smooth transition from one to the other and not four separate developers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. My name is David Pendle. I'm a partner at Marron's Planning and here to represent the applicant, Roscon Strategic Land, as you consider this application. You've got a very comprehensive report in front of you tonight, and Claire Hill's done a very detailed presentation on that. We're naturally very pleased it recommends approval of the outline application, which is for up to 95 homes, 25% of which will be affordable, subject to conditions in a Section 106 agreement. I won't repeat the contents of the committee report, but I will just touch on a few of the headlines, if I may. The application seeks to deliver part of your strategic housing allocation at HSG 8, west of Bulkington, which is allocated for homes in the Borough plan. And of course, we have a plan-led planning system. You have, of course, already taken significant decisions towards the delivery of this allocation by approving development for Taylor Wimpey, Redrow, and Elford Homes, and most recently the Vistry application at the last committee. The Roscon Strategic Land site is, of course, the last piece of that jigsaw. We've worked very hard together with your officers over the last 12 months, with the result being no objections from any statutory consultees. We've agreed to conditions and requests for Section 106 contributions, as you've seen from the report. We're aware of the concerns raised by members of the public, and again raised with you tonight by Speakers Against. And as you would hope, we've taken those issues very seriously. Issues relating to highways, biodiversity, flood risk, residential amenity. We've taken them seriously in preparing our plans, and of course they will set up and have an effect on the detailed design as we move into the next stage. There's three things that have just been mentioned, which I'll just touch on very quickly. One was access between the sites. and I think it is on page 29, where it talks about the legal agreement being utilised to ensure that unrestricted access between the two sites via dedicated pedestrian and vehicle access points is secured in perpetuity, and we agree with that. That was one point that was raised. Another point about the cycle lane, and you'll see from the Section 106 heads of term schedule in front of you that we've agreed to a contribution of £120,000 towards that. And the last matter, not to belittle any of the other matters, by the way, but the last one that I just wanted to touch on was the issue of foul water treatment. There is detailed commentary on that in page 35 of the report, which I won't repeat. I am joined tonight by my colleague Philip Taylor, sat to my left, of Savoy Consulting, who can answer any questions on highways. I should say Philip is a highway specialist. The committee report also notes that our layout is an illustrative layout. It touches on it not precisely aligning with what's happening to the south at Vistry. I've mentioned the committee report's reaction to that, and of course stands to reason that we don't expect to move to the next stage and not tie in with that site. We very much do. That would be part of our proposals. It talks about the prow, I should say public right of way, being in the green corridor. We agree with that, and also for the mix to be aligned to the Headner. We think that cohesive development is not only important but necessary, and welcome these comments. I would stress again that the illustrative layout is just that, it's illustrative.
Shall we? So to enable debate to take place, I will need a mover and seconder to move the recommendation to grant planning permission subject to the legal agreement and conditions printed in the agenda. Have I got a mover? Councillor Hartshorn, and a seconder. Councillor Shires. Thank you. So enable to move to debate. Any member? Councillor Markham.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say that I do actually agree with Mr Glynn. He's virtually said what I'd got written down, that all of that area, Dingley, Camping and Leyland, they all go out into Ben Road to get out onto the Coventry Road. And if this part of the development is built first, all of those 95 dwellings will then come out onto the same road. They'll access via Ben Road, so they'll go back and forth that way. I don't think it's acceptable. I think the infrastructure needs to be better, and I think there should be another exit or entrance into there. I appreciate when the other part is built, if that's built first, that may solve the problem, but if this is built first, I'm not sure that Ben Road can cope with that amount of traffic.
Thank you. There was a couple of things I wanted to know, but with regards the biodiversity, you've been asked for bits of information, and you've sent screenshots, etc. Why haven't you been able to send the full information, and we've needed to keep going back and asking for it?
You happy for me to answer that, Chair? Yep, thank you. We were a little surprised to see that in the committee report. I went away and had a good search for that request, and I can't find it. That doesn't mean, of course, it wasn't sent, but we didn't receive it. It's not normal for us not to work with Mark Crossley at the council on these matters. What I will say is that the screenshot, your parks officers reviewed that and found the baseline to be acceptable. The baseline calculations that we've undertaken, and of course it's the baseline calculations that would be used at the outline stage to agree what the habitat looks like today. The spreadsheet would relate to the landscape plan, which of course you've conditioned, and we would fully expect at the next stage to submit that information and have that discussion with you. So it does. I presumed it was our fault. We can't find it. I'm not suggesting there's any blame on any part, but we didn't receive it. But we're happy to see it conditioned and submit it as part of the next stage.
Also, what I found out recently that some of the Section 106 money can take up to 6 years to be paid. So with regards to the amount of development that's happening and the development of more houses, is there a condition that we can put in that would enable us to receive some of the Section 106 money in advance, or certainly sort of from day one of a potential build, so that schools and doctors' surgeries, etc., aren't bearing the costs? Because if we're not receiving them for 6+ years, who bears the cost for everything in the meantime? And also, I'm actually quite worried with regards to the flooding and sewage system. Are we talking to Severn Trent about actually updating some of the sewage systems that's going about that we have already, surely, of when they were put in? They weren't made for the amount of building we have now. I know that's a massive issue sort of around Weddington and any more buildings that are happening around the Camp Hill area. The sewage system seems to be something that's coming up and does need to be something, I think, that we need to look at. So on that, I think we ideally need to be getting some Section 106 money up front to help the education, and also to start looking at we've got the proper infrastructure.
Yes, Councillor, obviously just to say in terms of the Section 106 agreement, that is negotiated between ourselves, the council, through our legal advisors and the applicant solicitors as well. We do look at triggers in where we do look for some payments up front. We obviously have to be reasonable in terms of recognising that there does need to be some profit in development before we can ask for certain things. But I can assure you that through our legal officers, where we can get things up front, we do. But obviously we have to have, as you know, evidence-based planning system. We have to have the evidence to do that. But the terms of the Section 106 agreement will be finalised through our legal officer, and I'm happy if ward members want to be involved in that process to make sure that they're happy with that. Then certainly that's something I've done at other authorities, and I'd be happy to do it here as well.
Thank you. It's I've got 3 points I'd like to ask. They're on different topics that have been touched on by other councillors already. Would you like me to do them separately? Okay. Number one, it touches on the biodiversity question. I was a little bit alarmed to see the bit that said that part of a hedgerow would have to be removed, but it can be offset. It is my own personal view that any hedgerow that exists should be conditioned not to be removed, because the animals, birds, all the rest of it are used to that hedgerow. They don't know they've got to go to another hedge somewhere else. So that's number one. Number two, the point about the traffic flow. I'm looking for a bit of clarification on the trigger to have a mandated requirement for an emergency access route, because last week I believe we were told the trigger was 150, and the southeastern corner, and I know we can't talk about that application now, but it is relevant, was underneath that by 1. With this one, they're relying on access through that route. They themselves don't trigger the 150, so there's no requirement to put a safety route in. So I'd just like a little bit of clarification on the legal aspect of those safety routes, because to me, to look at it unholistically, as my other colleague mentioned earlier, it's like building a sports stadium with 4 different contractors, where one is doing the west wing and they don't have to put a sufficient number of fire escapes in because they haven't hit a trigger point. And the same goes round the whole stadium, and you end up with a stadium with not enough fire access. So I'd like a little bit of clarification on that one. And the last point, sorry, is about the views of the resident who is living next to 7A. I know that a high number of residents complained, which shows the emotion involved in the region. But if this was a simple planning application where my neighbour or their neighbour wanted to make an alteration to the boundary, a lot of weight would be put on that one voice because it has having a direct impact on them. I just want some steerage on planning as to why in this case, just because it's a wider development with far more houses involved, the voice of that single resident is then discounted.
Right, Councillor, if I can answer a couple of those points and then I'll probably pass over to highways, if that's okay. Obviously, in terms of biodiversity, the ideal is that nothing is lost. But you'll be aware that there is a kind of cascade, and it is often difficult to not lose things. It is immensely difficult on any site. What we then move towards is ensuring that that is mitigated against. And obviously in this case, we have looked at that and we are now at the mitigation stage and they can mitigate. So basically they can comply with policy on that. And then in terms of the views of the resident next to 7A, it's not been discounted. It's part there, and obviously some of the conditions we've applied are specifically to make sure those residents aren't adversely affected. Just to reassure you that it hasn't been ignored. And I think, am I okay to pass over to highways about emergency access?
Evening. Yes, trigger 150 houses. That's why it's essential that we have the site access that was agreed as part of last week's planning committee. It's essential that we get that, so we've got that connectivity and providing emergency access.
Thanks for that reply. How can we ensure, as somebody else raised a concern about that, on the timing of and the liaison between the developers to make sure that both access routes through both developments are constructed at the same time?
Again, it goes back to the legal agreement and the details of the legal. It's imperative that we tie up the kind of delivery of all these sites. I mean, it is the norm that a big site like this will not be delivered by one developer. So obviously we have, the knowledge in terms of ensuring that these are tied up, but the legal agreement is the key mechanism for that, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask the developer, please, if all the entry/exit to this site have been examined, i.e., playing devil's advocate, there is a track at the back which goes straight out onto Bedworth Road, and I'm not saying which way to go. All I'm asking is, has everything been assessed? I can't give you north-south from the picture. It's at the top of on this one I have. There is a track there. I think it's to sewerage works, and just wondered if that has been considered, and then all the foibles from Ben Road, Leyland Road and all the roads, they won't have to look at traffic going through and past their houses. So just wondered if that had been considered, and with the joining up to Coventry Road as well. I'm not saying don't make an access, I'm not suggesting anything, but could there be onto Ben Road a cycleway and pedestrian access only, as you have other cycle and pedestrian ways on joining up with the other part of the development? So, devil's advocate, I can see a road at the top, I don't know who owns the land, etc., etc. And just another thing with the sewerage, it beggars belief that Severn Trent Water, this is again on page 35, fourth chapter, that Severn Trent Water have been consulted on the application, however, no response has been received. It would be very nice from Severn Trent, who are obviously not here, if they would give some assurance that their plant could or couldn't, and things may have to be done. That for their treatment plant there, that it would cope with the added 95 dwellings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's 3 points there, and I'll sort of step my way through them. On the access, the vehicle access from Leyland Road has been designed. It's had, swept path analysis, we call it, to make sure that vehicles can come in and out appropriately. It's got the right visibility displays. There's a condition associated with that. It has, it has a road safety audit attached to it. So in answer to your question, yes, absolutely, that works. For the pedestrian access points, there are arguably two issues here. I'm sort of turning it into subsets, I beg your pardon, sort of forgive me for that. On the northern part of the site, there's the track that accesses down to the sewage works. And on our illustrative layout, and I stressed the point during my speech, it's an illustrative layout, we've shown access points through onto that track, thinking that that's good for permeability and access for people, who would obviously live on the site and access into and around the surrounding area. Whether or not it turns out that way depends on the details, and it depends on negotiations with the owners of the track. On the southern, southeastern side of the site, where you've got the Vistry application to the south, absolutely there needs to be discussions between the various development partners that take it on, as Maria Bailey just alluded to. That's quite common on sites of this size. And you've asked for a Section 106 legal agreement that makes sure that happens, and we are happy with that. So in terms of the access points, the main access, absolutely, we know that works. The pedestrian connectivity, there are matters of turning the illustrative design into a final design. That means there needs to be conversations, but there are conditions in a legal agreement that provide for that. On the sewage works, again, I don't want to reiterate the work that your officers have done, which is, in my view, entirely accurate and appropriate. Page 35, it steps its way through the legal agreements placed upon utilities providers, and it talks about the duty imposed on the sewer, Section 94 of the Water Industry Act, duty imposed on water undertakers to provide, improve or extend a system of public sewers. It's an absolute duty. And so, yes, it's a shame that they didn't come to the table. That is unfortunately common in the system that we've got, but there is a mechanism and a condition imposed to make sure that those discussions happen at the detailed design stage.
Thank you, Chair. I suspect this may be more of a question towards the highways officers. On page 59 of our agenda, we have the access, and that's mainly what we're looking at tonight, is the principle and access of the outline application. What I am concerned about is that where the access point into the site is, it's not a perfect crossroads, for want of a better phrase. Normally in a crossroads you would expect it to be equal on both the north-south axis and the east-west axis, depending on which way you look at it, but it's not on this stage, and my concern is that you are essentially going over the existing road slightly into the new access point where 7A currently is. Can I ask, will there be any adjustments to the road layout to make it clear that the priority will be coming straight down from Leyland Road into whatever road name it happens to be as the access point? Because I'm concerned about motorists in particular being confused about who has the right of way and priority in navigating that particular junction. If it isn't already conditioned, is it possible to condition that? Because that, whilst I'm not overly happy with the application, I have to live with it to a certain extent, and I'll come on to my views more generally in a minute, but that is the area I'm particularly stuck on at the moment, Chair, if that makes sense. Yes, please.
So the crossroad junctions, we try not to have a dead on 90 degrees anymore. Our preference is to have a staggered junction arrangement for safety reasons. It stops the going straight over manoeuvre. So it reduces one area of risk. In the RSA, the road safety audit, it did mention about the markings, and they will be suitably done as part of the technical approval. And it also recommended a sign, I believe, for a temporary period to show the new arrangements on the road. So we'll have one of these signs that go up that says new junction layout.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we don't have access to we do, but we don't have it printed in our agenda, each and every single document. Otherwise, we'd be reading tomes like that. So, to a certain extent, I am, whilst not happy, I understand the point. I disagree about the 90 degrees because it would make it easier for motorists to understand. I would prefer it to be a permanent sign rather than a temporary sign, because I think that needs to be made clear, because it's an existing neighbourhood where people will be used to that. And also, if you've got new people coming in, they wouldn't necessarily be as familiar with that, particularly visitors. But in terms of my general point, Chair, I accept that there will be a number of people who are unhappy that this will be passed. But as I said, and it feels like Groundhog Day, the principle of development on this land was established in 2019 under the old council when the borough plan was passed. So unless there is anything to go against the inspector's considered decision which would outweigh that, which I don't think officers are presenting to us there is, we're kind of on a sticky wicket. In terms of accesses to the site, which is probably the only bit we can really look at, again, we don't have anything from highways to the contrary to hang our hats on to potentially object to the application. And I think it's worth pointing out, particularly to those who may be saying, oh, I want this access, I want that access, that may make it work better. It may, but I have to consider what is before me, not what I would like before me. That is the way that planning has always worked, right or wrong. That is the way that we have to work it. So there is, whilst it may not be the perfect access, it is the access suggested, and there is nothing technical to suggest that that can't work that would be upheld at appeal. So as much as I don't necessarily like it, I will have to vote for it, although I would ask officers to investigate whether there is something we can do about permanent signage rather than just temporary, because I think that is a public safety issue that would be better for everyone in the long run.
I don't see anybody else indicating to speak. Would you like that permanent sign added in as a condition, Councillor Wilson?
If officers believe that we can get away with adding it in as reasonable, yes, I would.
Are you happy if we take your point that we investigate that and then obviously confirm, because it's just obviously we have to make sure that conditions meet all the requirements in planning policy. So I think I'm happy to take on board that we will investigate that with Highways and the applicant team as well.
Yeah.
On that basis, I'm happy to accept that, Chair, because I know that officers, if they believe it can go in reasonably, they will put it in. So I'm happy to accept that.
Thank you. So I move back to the recommendation to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement and the conditions printed in the agenda. All those in favour, please show. You counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5. Against. 1. Yeah, 1 against. Abstentions. 1, 2, 3. So that is carried. There was a short 5-minute break just while Councillor Chekovich and myself swap seats before we move on to item 2.
it's the firmness, because you're a delicate little flower.
I didn't say that at all.
Yeah, but if I press it lightly, it's not doing anything. I'm pressing it now low. It's firmly. Yeah. Do you need the light or something? I'm using it firm.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I ask that we resume our seats so we can resume the meeting, please? Okay, do we all have our all the members of the committee back? Yeah, okay. So just before we move on to a second item, I believe, Councillor Shires, you have a declaration.
Yes, Chair. It was just to say that I'd had a conversation with members of the public up there, a resident, but we didn't discuss the next item.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to mention, similarly, I'm here as the ward member to represent the residents, but I've also had a brief conversation with a couple of local residents as well. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, we'll go to Claire. Claire, if you'd like to present the second item, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for a change of use from a residential dwelling, which is Class C3 of the Use Classes Order, to a children's home, which is Class C2, and would provide care for up to 4 children aged between 8 and 18 years of age. As part of the change of use, all 5 bedrooms are to be retained, 4 for the children and 1 as a staff bedroom. An additional staff bedroom would be created at the ground floor, and the existing study would be used as a staff office. The conservatory would be used as a games room, and the current ensuite would become a shared bathroom. Objections have been received as detailed on the agenda. In terms of the principle of development, the site is located within an established residential estate in Nuneaton. Nuneaton has the primary role for employment, housing, town centre, leisure and service provision within the borough. Policy DS2 states that most development will be directed to Nuneaton as the primary town. The site is also within the defined settlement boundary as outlined in Policy DS3. As such, the site is considered to be in an acceptable and sustainable location. Policy H1 of the Borough Plan states that development proposals for specialised housing will be approved where there is a local need. Within one of their responses, Warwickshire County Council have stated that there is a need for children's homes placements in the county, and specifically within Nuneaton. It should be noted that it cannot be guaranteed that this home, if approved, would be used for children through the Warwickshire County Council Care Framework to specifically meet the county's needs. However, the end user of the development is not considered to be a planning consideration. Warwickshire County Council have explained that the process for housing looked after children is typically referring the children firstly to a block provider, then a provider on the West Midlands framework, and then all other spot providers. The county have confirmed that this home would be a spot provider unless they join the West Midlands framework. Providers can join the framework at any time, but the county state that they are seeing an increased use of spot providers as the West Midlands framework is unable to meet the need to match with existing children in placements. It is understood that throughout the application process, the developer has been in liaison with the county to join the West Midlands framework. Within Warwickshire County Council's application for a change of use from C3 to C2 on Staines Close, which was in April 2023, which we considered, it was stated that 72 Warwickshire children are in residential care placements and that 25 originate from a Nuneaton and Bedworth address. At present, only 5 of the total of 72 Warwickshire children are looked after in Warwickshire itself. It has been argued that there is not the need for this development within this area. However, the county state that they are seeing high levels of children in care originating from the Nuneaton and Bedworth borough. Having homes located in areas where there is a need enables children to maintain stability in other areas of lives, such as consistent support from family and friends, education, and access to other services of support. Therefore, it is considered that there are clear social benefits associated with the proposal. However, further information has come to light which does appear to demonstrate that there isn't a need within the county. It has been suggested that the proposal would cause an unacceptable impact on school places and local services. However, this is a very small scale proposal, and given that it is a 5-bedroom property at the moment, it would not be unusual for a family with 4 children to occupy the home. This would have the same impact on the schools and services when compared to the proposed change of use. While select resident objections, as detailed on the agenda, have stated that children's homes are commercial uses and should not be located within residential areas, it should be clarified that Use Class C2 is an umbrella category for residential institutions. As such, this is a residential type of use and therefore appropriate to be located within an established residential area. It is considered that residential estates are the most appropriate locations for small children's homes, so that the children are not ostracised from society and benefit from the same access to local schools, parks and facilities that any other child would. The site is located within a sustainable location in close proximity to nurseries, primary and secondary schools, bus stops, shops and parks. The Ministry of State for Housing and Planning produced a statement in May this year to advise local authorities regarding accommodating looked after children. The statement sets out the government's commitment to support the development of accommodation for looked after children and its delivery through the planning system. The document states that the planning system should not be a barrier to providing homes for the most vulnerable children in our society. When care is the best choice for a child, it is important that the care system provides stable, loving homes close to children's communities. These need to be the right homes in the right places with access to good schools and community support. It is not acceptable that some children are living far from where they would normally call home and separated from the people they know. The document also states that planning authorities should give due weight to and be supporting of applications where appropriate for all types of accommodation for looked after children in their area. The statement also refers to the Ofsted registration process as set out in the Guide to Children's Home Regulations. Under the Care Standards Act of 2000, it is an offence to run a children's home without the appropriate registration. This requirement to register helps to prevent unsuitable people from owning, operating, managing or working within children's homes. And providers are required to provide information to Ofsted in order to support the registration process, to include safeguarding, missing child and behaviour management policies. In addition to this, Ofsted also require a location assessment, which must show the steps that the owner has taken to make sure that the home is needed locally, is in the right place and is safe, and that the home promotes positive opportunities for children. In relation to residential amenity, the proposal would provide accommodation for up to 4 children with 3 members of staff at any one time. Concerns have been raised by residents with regard to safety, noise and loss of privacy, all of which are considerations which may impact the residential amenity of the area. With regard to noise generated from the comings and goings, a similar application was refused and overturned at appeal in January 2023 in Burnley. This proposal provided 4 bedrooms for children and 2 for staff. Within the appeal decision, the inspector stated that the proposed use would function very much like a typical family home, with older adults caring for children of mixed ages, and the numbers that would be present in the dwelling at any one time would not be greater than that can be expected to be present in an existing 5-bedroomed house. The inspector acknowledged that there would be obviously inevitably comings and goings to and from the site at shift handover times, as well as occasional visits by family members and representatives of agencies and other professions. These would generate a degree of noise and disturbance, although this is likely to be spread out through the day. The inspector of that appeal stated that given the scale of that proposal, the noise and disturbance associated with the comings and goings would not be significantly above what could reasonably be expected to be generated by an existing 5-bedroom house. The inspector went on to say that a family dwelling could consist of adults, children and teenagers. In occupying the property, they could generate considerable activity in the form of comings and goings for work, school, leisure and shopping at various times of the day. This decision is a material consideration for this application. In this case, it is also considered that the numbers of comings and goings would not be dissimilar to that expected from a 5-bed family home. In terms of noise from the future occupiers, whilst it's been assumed within select objections, it is considered reasonable to assume that looked after children are any more noisy or disruptive than any other family or children that may move into the property. In addition, the inspector's decision concluded that any noise arising from the property would be unlikely to significantly exceed levels that could be generated by a typical family home. Environmental Health have been consulted with and have no objection. As such, it is considered that noise impacts associated with the change of use are considered to be of an acceptable level. Some objections have also raised concerns that the children living at the property would represent a threat to local children and may attract criminals and antisocial behaviour to the area. The NPPF seeks to ensure that development is inclusive and the fear of crime does not undermine quality of life, community cohesion and resilience, and the fear of crime can be a material consideration. However, there must be evidential basis for that fear. Warwickshire Police have been consulted and have no objection. In addition, the management of the facility would be required to operate within the minimum national standards for children's homes, which would be subject to Ofsted regulation and inspections. There are no physical changes proposed to the property that require planning permission, and therefore there would be no impact to neighbours in terms of increased loss of light or privacy. In terms of highway safety, parking standards require 1 space per 4 residents and 1 space per 2 full-time equivalent staff members. However, when considering that this is to be a children's home, it is not considered necessary to provide parking for the residents, as the children are unlikely to drive or own a car. County Highways agree that the children are unlikely to drive themselves, so consideration should only be given for staff parking. 2 parking spaces are provided currently, and this would be sufficient for the 3 staff members, which would also meet our SPD standards. However, a 3rd and 4th space could be provided on the existing grass area and driveway to the front, which would exceed our parking standards. Condition 4 has been added to ensure that the 4 parking spaces are provided in accordance with the submitted plan. It should also be considered that this is a large 5-bedroom property. As such, it would not be unusual for a couple with 4 children to occupy the house, or potentially a couple, grandparents and 2 to 3 children. These children may stay in the family home until their 20s and own their own cars, which could result in 2 adults and 4 young adult and teenagers having their own cars. It is considered that this scenario is likely to have more of an impact on parking than this proposal would. County Highways have reviewed the proposals and have no objection subject to conditions. Officers consider that there are no reasonable grounds for refusal. As such, the recommendation is one of approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Nuneaton, Warwickshire do not need any more low-quality children's homes. We already have a significant over-provision of children's homes in Warwickshire. Warwickshire County Council is also in the process of opening more homes across the county. Children should primarily be with existing carers in their local area where they have lived with family and friends. Children should not be displaced miles away from their own communities. Read the May statement. Rachel McLean, Minister of State for Housing, said that some local authorities do not make proper provision to look after children. This is true. Unlike Warwickshire, some social services departments do not put enough resources into children's homes when children cannot be fostered. The applicant should look to open homes in areas around the country where local authorities are failing their children and communities. The ministers urge local authorities, not Nuneaton or Warwickshire, to not use the planning system to stop provision of good quality children's homes, provided they were the right homes in the right places. 7 St Ives is not the right home in the right place. We currently have 12 times more good quality private children's homes places available than we need in the county, and larger number of low-grade private children's homes which are also underutilised. Warwickshire County Council plans to open another children's home in Staines Close, less than half a mile away from St Ives. Points in the planning statement: maintaining young people in their local area. I do not believe that any of the children who will reside at the property will be from the local area. Can the applicant confirm this? This home will be providing a commercial profit-making business, charging extortion amounts for low-quality provision. Operating as a family dwelling. If this is the case, why do staff need separate staff areas? Family homes do not have separate areas with locked doors. Diagram 70, referring to the car parking, you cannot park 4 vehicles on the drive. I've sent in a picture to show that there is only 2 spaces on that drive. St Ives is a cul-de-sac with 26 properties. Approximately 1/3 of the houses are bungalows with elderly residents. Street lights are turned off by Warwickshire County Council in our cul-de-sac at midnight. This has already made residents feel very vulnerable, and the additional arrival departures from staff leaving, arriving at unsociable hours is unacceptable, and potentially having vulnerable youth from the children's home outside after dark is a safeguarding issue. I do not believe that the applicant has carried out due diligence, and they are quite clearly not local to our area unless otherwise I'm told, but their information has been all redacted. I believe this proposal seeks to provide a need in our county that does not exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cole. Can I just ask any members if there's any clarification? Just turn your microphone.
Sorry.
Thank you. Are there any members who want to ask any questions?
It's about the change of residential use. I know that much of this application is focused on it being a change of use towards children's residence. What if it doesn't succeed as a children's residence? Once the category has changed, does it then mean that the owner of the property could use it to house whoever they wanted? Okay, it was a clarification from the officer because I didn't get a chance to ask at that time.
Is it on? In planning, it states that there are no trees on the property, and there are 2 large mature trees which bring a lot of wildlife to surrounding properties, and there is no mention of what will happen to these, as we would not like to see them removed, as they also offer a lot of privacy to neighbours. On the planning application statement, it is stated they are going to add a downstairs toilet and an largely ensuite to a full family bathroom. As since construction of this property, there has been an ongoing problem with sewage from number 7, which results in Mrs. Sharma at number 5 and myself. When it rains heavily, we get an obnoxious smell and brown water in our downstairs toilets. Also, number 7 has experienced several blockages over the years, which have resulted in my side back fence being removed for access to what was recommended by Severn Trent and Dynarod to previous owners before the current ones, that they should not use toilet paper in downstairs toilet to alleviate problems, so by adding to the system could exacerbate problems. So if this planning is allowed, what measures will new owners put in place to rectify it? As the property is situated at one of the narrowest parts of the close, we feel that with 12 staff, which originally on the plan was only 3, working a shift system will adversely affect and impact our close community and way of life, and I do not know of any family dwelling that would operate in this fashion. It has had in its and is causing a lot of mental stress and anxiety to my neighbours, myself and the surrounding area, resulting in some thinking of moving away. This is the third application of this type since April in Nuneaton. Is there some sort of policy the council has that the residents are unaware of? As from my own research and understanding from our local councillor representing us, we have more capacity than is required and would not necessarily use this private facility, so one can only presume the clients would not be of local, and my understanding it is difficult to employ and retain staff, so therefore of no enhancement locally and should be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Quick. I'd just like to ask again, any councillors, any members have any points of clarification they would like to ask? No? Okay, in that case, the next speaker I have on my agenda is Councillor Rob Tromans. However, he's not here with us tonight. I believe he's on holiday. He has sent to all members quite an extensive statement. Okay, so hopefully you've all had the chance to study that. However, we do have the other ward councillor here who is our next speaker, and that's Councillor Jeff Clark. So, Councillor Clark, when you're ready, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry to hear of the problems that's caused to local residents in relation to this property, unfortunately. That's where we're at. That said, I am also aware that Councillor Tromans has provided all members with significant detailed information as indicated at the outset, and I don't intend to regurgitate and reiterate that. I'm sure all members are quite able to pick up on the various points. That's in relation to where we're at there. I am concerned to hear that it's a spot property allocation potentially. It's not being requested by the County Council, as the County Council, as we've identified, there is sufficient places already within Nuneaton and Bedworth and Warwickshire. But the concern I have is that we're adopting these children from out of area, i.e. West Midlands and other areas. I am personally aware that this has happened in Nuneaton. Indeed, I'm aware of one property that has a number of concerns and measures on a regular basis. I won't say weekly, but when it does occur, they have problems on a daily basis, where they're not operated under any particular control of local authority or any guidance from any regulatory aspect other than the police. That said, the police have their own issues and matters to deal with on a daily basis and can't always be on hand to deal with issues that occur in places such as the one I'm thinking of at the moment on a daily basis and causing great disturbance to residents there. It's, as I say, we are talking about a settled community in a residential area for some 35 plus years, and to insert something like a children's home into the middle of a small cul-de-sac, at the end of the day, it's, as was said, got pensioners and those types of areas, those types of people in that area who are in a settled community, have got on very well, would severely disturb and disrupt that settled community. So I think there is an element of disturbance that could potentially happen here, because I am aware of it in, as I say, one area of Nuneaton, and it's not good. Is that my 3 minutes? Just finally then, Chair, if I may, I would urge the committee to consider all this information that's been provided by Councillor Tromans and by the officers in relation to the need, and would urge that they reject this application on this occasion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark. Can I just ask any members if there's any points of clarification? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask Councillor Clark, he mentions about an instance he knows of elsewhere within the borough. Does he know roughly where those children have been imported from?
I do, Chair. It's from a city region. As I understand it, it's probably inappropriate that I actually detail it, but it's a city region, a number of miles from here, not in the West Midlands, but on the southern borders. So we are importing people from other areas where they're not being accommodated, as was identified by their own authorities. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. The next speaker I have then is Mr. Sindhu, who's speaking in support of tonight's application, and I believe you represent the Centauri Group. You have your 3 minutes when you're ready, sir.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Sid Sidhu. I'm the CEO of Centauri Group. I'll try and address many of the points that have been made today that I can recall. We are working with Warwickshire County Council. We have been from the beginning. We are registered on the Coventry, Solihull and Warwickshire portal. We do plan to provide the provision of quality placements for Nuneaton, Bedworth, Warwickshire as a whole. From the beginning of this application, we've been talking to Warwickshire Police. We've had approval for them. We have to carry out a location risk assessment even before we start. So this location hasn't been randomly chosen. I suppose it's quite perverse, but all the reasons that are being stated as why the home shouldn't be there is exactly the reasons what Ofsted require to be in place for a home to be located around safeguarding and amenities being available for these children. I suppose as a society, we all have a responsibility to look after the more vulnerable in our society, especially children. Centauri Care plan to provide quality provision. We will take on qualified staff. There is not just going to be anybody working. These are professionals that are going to be looking after these vulnerable children to help them to ensure that they can overcome previous traumas. We as a company aim to provide quality placements for Warwickshire. We have been working with Warwickshire. I've been working with Rachel. As I mentioned earlier, we are already registered on the portal. We will join the West Midlands framework. Plan is to ensure that we provide these placements for local children. So even before we started, we sent out a freedom of information request to all of the councils across the Midlands to assess what their needs were in what areas. And it's from that information that we started the search for properties. And Nuneaton was identified as having a requirement. We spoke to the county council, and we've been looking for properties in this area that would meet the criteria, the strict criteria around the risk assessment we have to follow. The home cannot operate unless it's Ofsted registered. In order to become Ofsted registered, it has to have a responsible individual, because we are an organisation who will work with the council and will manage a registered manager who will manage the home, will also manage the staff. All the staff have to be qualified. Registered managers have to have a level 5. All our care workers will be working towards or already have a level 3 qualification in children and young people. So we plan to, provide a quality service, an ongoing service for Warwickshire. So comments made about sewage. Wasn't aware of this before the application, but we will do what we need to do to ensure that these are investigated and resolved. I'm trying to remember all the questions. Sorry? Okay, thank you. That's it, yeah.
I will, in that case, now ask any points of clarification anyone would like to ask Mr. Sindhu. Councillor Green.
Hello, sir. Could you tell me a bit more about the Centauri Group? How many homes have you got? How many places do you currently offer?
Centauri Group is a new startup. It's something that's been in the making for the last 2 years. Basically, we did a lot of due diligence to know about this area before we came into it. So we are a new startup. We are not running any new existing homes. So this will be the first one in our group.
Okay. Any other points of clarification or a follow-up question, Councillor Green?
No, thank you for that information.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. I'm sorry you can't join in, madam. I'm sorry, it's not the way this committee works. No, I'm sorry. This is now open to members of the Planning Application Committee. There is no comeback from a public gallery, I'm afraid. I appreciate that it's something you're passionate about, but it's not how this committee or others work. So we have a recommendation before us tonight to grant planning permission subject to the conditions preceded. So to move to the discussion, I now need a proposer and a seconder. So Councillor Shires, you're happy to propose, and Councillor Green, if you're happy to second. Okay, so we'll now move to the conversation. So any members? So Councillor Cape, we'll start with you, then Councillor Shires, and Councillor Hammersley, and Councillor Wilson, Councillor Smith. Yeah, okay, and we'll add others as they come up. Thank you. So Councillor Cape, over to you.
Apologies for my lack of form earlier. It's referring to the previous point. Once a change of use is given from C3 to C2, and in this one, the application is focusing heavily on the residential need, which is being debated to and from. Once that's been granted, can the property then be used for any residential purpose at C2 other than children's homes?
In some circumstances, it could be, but in this case, we've added a condition on that restricts it to a home of no more than 4 children, and also it can't change to any other use within C2. So it's specifically for a care home for children.
Okay, Councillor? No? Okay, so I'll move on to Councillor Shires then.
Thank you. In planning, we're only allowed to look on whether there's a material reason of why it can't be granted. So usually personal, issues don't really come into it. And I'm sure, Chair, you'll stop me if I need to. But I think at the bottom of this, we need to remember that we are talking about children through all of this. And we're not importing, they are not a good that we're bringing from somewhere else. And even if they have come from somewhere else, Horston Grange is certainly a very nice place where anybody would like to grow up. Now, the only way I can put this, because there's been questions asked about the people changing shifts and how that would impact. So, if possible, I'm going to give you a bit of a personal story of actually how a home such as this can run. Okay, so my mum suffered a brainstem stroke, and when she moved back to Nuneaton, somehow she managed to break her leg and came to live with me. We had her living with us for 3 to 6 months, and she had carers coming in 4 times a day. I live in a very small cul-de-sac with 26 houses and very limited parking. The impact on residents of 2 carers coming in 4 times a day from between 8 in the morning and 10 at night was nil. The impact was on me, but it was nil for the family. We've talked about these children having multiple issues. My youngest has attachment disorder, autism, pathological demand avoidance, sensory processing issues, and he has mobility issues. My neighbours have been impacted more by a child that I birthed, that wasn't imported, that has come from what would be regarded a nice, normal family, I suppose. They've been impacted probably far more than a potential child who could have come from difficult circumstances, as they've had witnessed him kicking and screaming, being dragged up the road to get into the car because we're going to school, or when he's kicked off in the street, or when he's been in the house and he's just been absolutely screaming and the windows have been open. My point of that I'm getting over to you is anybody, I could buy that house and move in and you could still have very similar issues to other children. I can see that you're shaking your head on there. I've also got friends where they've had children, they live in Weddington, they've had children, they've had the police multiple times to their property, their kids are out doing. I understand the concerns, but you can never actually guarantee who your neighbour is going to be or what issues they are going to bring. You can only hope that with it being managed and run by a professional company, that they have accountability, and you would have hopefully, and I would hope that this would be in any agreement, that they would have accountability and you would have somewhere to go. Certainly in the area where I represent, we've had 2 homes in one street, and I have been very much close working with the council and with the police and with the provider to ensure that those young people are supported effectively, to the point where I've been on their WhatsApp groups, so when issues have occurred, I've been able to get involved, and we have managed to bring that down because we have held the provider accountable at all times.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. I'll move to Councillor Hammersley next.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't doubt that you have all the skilled staff and you have checked all the responsibilities that you need to cover to house these people. The issue appears to be with local residents as to what type of people it's going to attract and what the consequences of those people being in the houses. So I'll have to give this some serious thought to. I don't doubt you will have the skills, but will it be in the right place? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I'll draw members' attention to my declaration of interest in that with my employment with the court service. And during my time in the court service, I have been involved in the care world in dealing with that too. And I have to say, I have read some very, very shocking and difficult and very emotionally upsetting cases during my time working in the care environment. So I fully appreciate how challenging this can be. We must absolutely divorce these children from the issue about the change of use, because it is not these children's fault they are in the circumstances they are in. Quite often, children in the care system have been subject to emotional, physical, psychological, sexual abuse, and they require extra care. That is where my concern comes from about is the suitability of the facilities which are being put in for those children, because they will, in most instances, require additional support and structure, etc. There is no statistical evidence to support any assertion. I'm not saying that the speakers tonight have said this, but it's been indicated in some of the responses in the pack, Chair, that there will be a sudden increase in crime and antisocial behaviour. There is no statistical link with that. In fact, you can go to any area across the borough, Whitestone, Weddington, Camp Hill, Slough, wherever, and you will find badly behaved children not in the care system who are probably creating more havoc for local residents than may, and I emphasise may, because no one knows how this is going to work, truthfully, in this system. My issue is about the need with this, and I'm somewhat at a crossroads, Chair, because I read the report which officers prepared, which said that there is a need. And my experience is Nuneaton and Bedworth does have a higher proportion in Warwickshire of children in care. That's always been my experience on that, and it's something I'm very passionate about. But then we have evidence provided by councillors Tromans, which they must have got from somewhere, from, I assume, the same source or the same department about children's services. My issue then becomes, and I think officers have alluded to this, that they've had this information come in, which is contradictory. I'm confused, therefore, Chair, quite honestly, about which way I go, because I want to support children who are in desperate need and need that support, and being in a live environment is actually more beneficial for children, that it helps them acclimatise to real life and gives them the life skills they need. But it cannot be at the expense of everything else we have to balance, and that's where I'm coming from. Because also, we have to remember, unless officers tell me otherwise, if we approve this actually theoretically takes an available house away from the overall housing numbers that we have to prove. Because we know we have a housing need within the borough, so we are taking a dwelling house away and giving it some other purpose. And if we keep doing that, we're going to lose the houses for everything else and see more green fields disappear over time. I also have reservations, Chair, about whether this is suitable, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but from memory, the play area that used to be on Camborne Drive is no longer there. The play equipment's been taken out, unless it's been... It has been taken out, hasn't it, from memory? And those are the sorts of facilities, particularly children in the care system, will want to go out and use. I'm not saying that other kids don't want to, but I think there is, from my point of view, it would be even more important that these children can access those sorts of facilities. And from recollection, the next point available would be over on the Wall Estate, because they will have had to have delivered some over there. That is a major road you've got to cross to get over. Yes, you now have some pedestrian crossings on there, but that is still, in my mind, not a suitable alternative for these children. But officers will have already considered that, so wouldn't necessarily think it is a point to refuse on. So, I come back to the crossroads about need. I don't feel capable of making that decision tonight, Chair, because I'm assuming officers haven't had a chance to analyse the information properly put across by Councillor Tromans. So I would actually move a deferral, Chair, of this application so that officers can assess that information. And also, and it's very unusual because we've asked for transport to be here, I would ask for an officer from the Children's Department to come and explain those figures too, if they are available, because I need to satisfy myself this is the absolute right thing to do, because I don't want to put these kids at risk, but I also want to balance out the need correctly. So that is my proposal, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Before we go to that, and I will come back and we'll sort of take a vote on that, we did have one of us speak, and I'd just like to afford Councillor Smith the opportunity to say what he needs to say, and then we'll come back and we'll look and see if we've got a proposer and a seconder and take that to the vote. Is that okay? All right, thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, Councillor Wilson has stolen my thunder. I had exactly the same point to make over need. I didn't want to talk about the management of the site or who might occupy it. I don't consider those necessarily planning reasons for rejecting. There are conflicting figures coming out of Warwick County Council. I believe the figures that Councillor Tromans put in his letters he's distributed came from a director of children's services at the council that basically said there were 12 times the actual need. And I think there's a difference between Warwick County Council's own need of their own homes and the overall need that's supplied by private companies. And I think there's a disparity between the two figures. So I likewise would like to get to the bottom of the need, because if we were to reject it, I think the only thing we could reject it on is on policy, and that would be HS1 of the Borough Plan. And that states that development proposals for specialised housing will be approved where local need can be demonstrated. So I stress that is local need. I think we need clarification from Warwick County Council, and I too would like to have someone here from Children's Services to explain that need difference that we're seeing. So I'll be happy to second the motion.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Wilson, are you happy to propose? And you've said you're happy to second, so I'll put that. Oh, sorry, Councillor Cape, is that?
Yeah, my question isn't about needs, so I'm quite happy for that proposal and second to go ahead. It's more about the planning application itself, which we can judge on. So at this stage, just a little bit of clarification on the layout. The current ensuite is down as being replaced by a bathroom. Is that actually going to be a bathroom? I'm a bit concerned that the internal layout isn't big enough for the needs of 4 children with added support required, plus the staff that are going to operate it. And the second one on clarification was the point that was raised about Burnley and the case there where they said that there would not be a significant increase in noise. I just don't want it to be apples and pears. In this case, the conservatory is being approved or suggested as a games room. Now, these kids are going to need a lot of stimulation, and we'll probably use it as a full-on lively games room, hopefully. So I'm just a little bit concerned that there is inadequate soundproofing, if it's approved, to actually repurpose an existing conservatory as a games room for 4 kids who actually need a lot of support and stimulation.
Yeah. So anyone wants to come back on this at all?
Yeah, in terms of the sufficient space, I would imagine that is something that would be required under their Ofsted registration. So not really for something for the planning committee to really consider. I mean, even as a family dwelling, they could change rooms internally anyway, from a bathroom to a bedroom or whatever, or games room, and that doesn't require planning permission. In terms of using the conservatory as a sort of gaming space and social space, again, that could be used by a family for gaming and that sort of thing. Environmental health have been consulted, haven't raised any issues regarding soundproofing or any extra soundproofing that would be required. And those are obviously the experts that we consult on such things.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Because we're going to sort of possibly hold fire on that, Councillor Kate, and we may well revisit that at a future meeting, depending on which way the vote's about to go. So we've had a proposal by Councillor Wilson that we defer this. It's been seconded by Councillor Smith. Obviously, it would be good to get people like Children's Services to come in and to hear from them, and for members to be able to actually ask them questions, just as we've done with colleagues from sort of highways who've been fantastic tonight in terms of giving us some answers. Councillor Smith.
I just wanted to come back to underpin the importance of this, because this isn't a standalone application. There are 2 or 3 similar ones in the pipeline over the coming weeks, and I think it's really important we get clarification on this so we're able to deal with them all in the same way, because this question will keep arising.
Thank you, Councillor. That was a very good point, well made. So, all those in favour of deferring? Okay, I think that's carried unanimously. Okay, so we will defer this matter and we will come back to it at a future meeting. So I'm now going to bring this meeting to a close. I'd like to thank all the members of the public, Warwickshire County Council and officers from MBBC, and obviously the members of the PAC for turning up tonight. Thank you and good night.